at Sivotec. And our sponsor this morning, this is presented by South Florida Business and Wealth. And unfortunately, I did get a last minute text. Normally, this is, and we do have ASL interpretation by Beth Wagmeister, but she is not feeling well this morning. So I still wanted to give her a wish well, hope she feels better, and hopefully we will have her back next Tuesday with us. And again, our sponsor, South Florida Business and Wealth, I don't know if I've got them on here with me this morning. Hopefully I do, so they can say a couple words this morning to our audience. Building South Florida into a tech hub. So this is our mission statement as an organization, and a little bit about how we're going about doing that. Our community creed. So Tech Hub South Florida is wholeheartedly committed to building a welcoming, collaborative, and inclusive community for all. We put inclusivity first, engage with others, are considerate to all, and don't sell to people. Again, our mission is building South Florida into a tech hub. We are a nonprofit 501c6. We're a membership or corporate membership driven organization. And we currently have over 200 corporate members and thousands of talented professionals from Miami-Dade all the way to Palm Beach, and even a couple sprinkled in Martin County. Some of our current members, we have City Furniture, Jupiter Medical Center, Crown Castle, Social Mobile Carrier, Boca Code. There's a ton of great companies here, from we have startups all the way to enterprise level. A little bit about the membership, if anybody is interested. The corporate memberships offer different job listings, resume distribution, speaking opportunities. We do have guest blogs, PR support, and of course, different ways to support and get involved in multiple programs and events throughout the year. If anybody's interested, I will drop my, my contact information in chat, and you can feel free to reach out. A little bit about our weekly events. We've got our Monday night tech talks every Monday. We actually are getting back to doing them in person starting next month in May. Our first one in person, it will be hybrid, so you guys can still log in through Zoom if you guys are not able to be there in person. But we will have the first in person is going to be in Boca at Boca Code, one of our local coding schools. And that will be Monday, May 10th. So again, we can drop that in chat, the link to get registered for that. Our community coffees, like this morning, we've got panel discussions on all sorts of topics, from technology to culture, talent, and engagement within companies, and so on. They are alternating every Tuesday mornings at 8 a.m. Also, our podcasts also alternating on Tuesdays at 8 a.m. This is where we have our current president and CEO, and then also one of the co-founders of WinCode, now BrainStation in Miami, that are talking to different business, technology, and startup leaders in South Florida. And finally, on Fridays, we have our Lunch and Learns every Friday for 60 minutes from 12 to 1. Resume distributors. So anybody that is looking for job opportunities, you can actually go to our website, and if you click on talent, under the drop-down menu, there will be both our job board and then our resume distributor. The job board, you can look for specific jobs there. If you don't find something specific that you want to apply to, you can actually upload your resume to the resume distributor and send them out to any of our member companies and companies who have signed up to receive their resumes. And last but not least, we do have a very active Slack channel with, I think, maybe more than 4,000 people now. You can actually go to techhubsouthflorida.org/Slack, and you can actually text us your email address to get added to our Monday e-newsletters that go out about 2 o'clock every afternoon on Mondays. If you text us your email to 561-250-7206. And I'm going to take myself off sharing screen here. There we go. And I'd like to get started by with our discussion this morning by having each of the panelists just tell us your name, the organization you're coming from, and then we can get started with the Q&A. And I'm just going to start with whoever's on my screen here first. So I actually have Yenvy.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me this morning. Very excited to have this conversation on healthcare in 2050. I'm a mentor for a fabulous organization called the Venture Mentoring Team, which is a pivotal piece of South Florida's ecosystems to building startups and also connecting startups with organizations and funding as well. And so very excited to be part of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Yenvy, so much. I'm glad to see this coming full circle because I think we met a few years ago at a women's startup event. So it's really exciting to have you back.
Thank you.
Next one I've got here is Pete.
Good morning. Pete Martinez, CEO of the Sivotec family of companies. We specialize on artificial intelligence and big data analytics, primarily in the area of health. Previously, Vice President of Global Business Services at IBM.
Thanks so much, Pete. And we're always happy to have you on the board and super involved with everything that we do at Tech Hub too. So thank you very much. And I've got next on my screen, Meggie. Oh, I think you're on mute, Meggie. Oh, no, can't hear you. It looks, well, I guess it doesn't show that you're on mute, but we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can, yes.
I work for DSS. DSS is a healthcare IT solutions company. We've been around for 30 years. My role is Director of Strategic Innovation. So my team is really responsible for researching emerging technologies and how we can really be disruptive and ahead of the game in healthcare tech today.
Thank you so much, Meggie. Always appreciate you. And Oscar.
Yeah, hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you for having us here today. My name is Oscar Perez. I'm the Vice President of IT at Memorial Healthcare System, and I'm also the President of South Florida HIMSS, and looking forward to some great discussions this morning. So thank you for having me.
Thanks so much, Oscar. And I am checking in all of our folks in this morning. Unless I've missed him, I do not see Mark from South Florida Business and Wealth. So if you're here, somebody from South Florida Business and Wealth, feel free to stop me. But I again wanted to say thank you to them because they always support our community coffees each and every Tuesday morning. So to get started with our questions here this morning, how this is basically going to work is I'm just going to address a question to each of the panelists, and then anybody additionally that would like to follow up and answer and give your feedback or input, please feel free to do so. So I'm going to start with the first question addressed to Oscar. What role does technology and information systems play in our current healthcare industry today?
Thanks, Nikki. That's a good question. I think, technology has become even more pervasive in our industry. I think for many years in healthcare, it sort of tended to lag behind other industries. So it was always kind of easy to predict some of the future, at least future trends in technology by looking at other industries and saying, oh, that's going to come to healthcare, in the next year, in the next 10 years, the next 5 years. But I think technology is being embraced more and more by healthcare organizations, healthcare vendors, and it's really something that's pervasive throughout our organization. As a healthcare provider, there isn't anything that happens in our organization for the most part that doesn't have some sort of a technology component. EMRs, electronic medical records, have become, again, pervasive. That was something that many years ago was a lot, there were still many practices and even some healthcare systems on paper. So obviously we've made a lot of great strides there. We are still far behind many other industries. But I think we're quickly catching up as our industry is sort of shifting to more of a consumer-based model where the consumer is starting to have more of a choice when it comes to healthcare and not just dictated upon their provider or their insurance company of where they can go. I think that's driving the incentives for our organizations to change. And again, we're like a big ship that takes a while to sort of turn and change. But I will say that the changes are coming and the incentives are starting to change so that those changes become more real. And I can tell you that many healthcare organizations have been transforming over the last, several years to take on some of this more value-based care and consumer-based care. So yeah, I would say, technology plays a key role. Many people say that technology is an enabler. Obviously, I consider myself a healthcare person first being in healthcare. And our main priority is always taking care of the patient in a safe and a quality-based way. But technology can help in a lot of those areas, and I think that executives are starting to embrace that a lot more, and we are definitely seeing changes in our industry, whether it's that are starting to mimic other industries a lot quicker. You're starting to see players come into this market that would never have been here before. So the Apples, the Googles, the Microsofts, and just Amazons, the outside players that have traditionally not been in healthcare coming in. So big tech is definitely seeing this industry as prime for change, and we'll continue to see disruptors in this area for sure.
Yeah, I think, Oscar, I caught a few things that you said were they could be like topics in themselves, but one of them that I caught was actually just how executives are starting to actually take kind of the technology seriously and how money can be made from that, and they're seeing the benefits of it. But then also is, as you were talking, I see the panelists, a bunch of head nods as you were saying, it's definitely more patient driven now. So I think, again, we'll touch on some of that throughout the discussion, but I just wanted to point out that those were actually some great points there that you brought up. Did anybody else on the panel want to add to any of that there?
Yeah, I can add a comment just about, because we are, as Oscar mentioned, behind in the technology aspect of healthcare, looking at the technologies, moving towards a more consumer base, we're more open now to incorporating technologies that the consumer is using that captures healthcare data. So I think that's really important to look at, because now it becomes a holistic view rather than just looking at the technologies that are within the healthcare center and healthcare network.
Very right. Thank you, Meggie. Sorry, I was struggling there to take myself off mute. Yes, and so I did want to ask Pete this next question here is, how has the implementation of technology and information systems changed the healthcare industry over the last couple decades? Like, how have we seen that kind of transition over time?
Well, we break up technology into two areas. First, the technology, pure technology itself, and then information technology. Those have evolved at completely different paces. If you look at the evolution of imaging systems, of instrumentation, of prosthetics, all have evolved at a tremendous speed, and there's actually industry-leading evolutions that have in MRI, CAT scans, PET scans, all of the above. Prosthetics has been marvelous, the work that's being done. Information technology in the health sector has not kept up. If we think of the electronic medical record as a fundamental vehicle to transfer information, most of these evolved from billing systems, and they started to evolving into a means to capture what was recorded by a physician. That has not kept up. Over the last 12 years, we've seen a much faster evolution of these, but it's still very fragmented. Think of the electronic health record being by specialty and not inclusive of the whole systems of the body. Think of your typical electronic record does not include your genomic information, your environmental information, your lifestyle information, or your cognitive information. Those are probably four of the key leading indicators of your health. So until we go to what Oscar mentioned, which is much more of a consumer-driven approach, it says, look, you got to take a look at my whole body and all of the systems that interplay with my body. So it can't be broken down by specialty. My body doesn't work that way. And second, be much more driven to a consumer of information. One of the areas that I challenge quite a bit is in the culture of health, we still refer to the consumer, to the customer, as patient. Look up the word patient in the dictionary. It says somebody willing to endure pain and trouble without complaining. This is what we've relegated our customer to. So it's self-fulfilling, sit there, put up and shut up, until we start going through the transformation of putting the consumer, the customer, the client at the center of our systems, will we not evolve into thinking of a full systems implementation?
There's just some pretty strong points there too, Pete. I'm curious, you know, from the rest of the panel here is, because I know that this discussion came up during one of our last committee meetings, but do you ever really think that healthcare will get there, that we are going to be patient centric? I mean, just because of all the money made around the industry, do we ever see that really happening? And if so, what's going to move the needle? Like, what do you think is going to be that first push to be able to do that?
I mean, I'll start it, Nikki. I think from my perspective, I think there's absolutely no doubt that we're going to get there. And I think it's going to take some of these disruptors to come in and sort of shake things up. You know, just like you saw in the taxi industry with Uber. I know it sounds cliche now, but you see Netflix in the video industry disrupting Blockbuster, and obviously healthcare, because it deals with consumer and patient's health, is not as trivial as some of these industries. And there's a lot more complexities because there's different parties, insurance companies, doctors, and others. But still, there's no doubt that this industry, and we're already seeing it. We're already seeing it, at least in primary care. We're seeing that completely disrupted with the pandemic. You've seen the adoption of telemedicine and telehealth. And that's not, you know, that's here to stay. So I think absolutely that's going to take place, and it's going to be probably sooner than we think. And I think the shift will truly come when the incentives for how people get paid for the business shift over completely to a more, whether it's quality-based, you know, or value-based approach than sort of a volume-based approach. Today, we're kind of in both worlds. And so people just continue in business as old in some areas, but eventually it's going to shift over.
I want to add to that. I think the disruption's already started. We're in it. We don't feel it as much because we're having the conversation. We know it's coming, but it's going to be a point in the next 5 to 10 years where you're just living it and you look back, whoa, I wasn't expecting it. It's not something where it's a switch and all of a sudden, okay, the next day you know, this disruption is going to happen. It's kind of trained right now. There's small pieces of how we're adopting to new technology. For example, if you look at Alexa, Siri, we're being taught to speak to robots already. We don't realize it, but we've been talking to robots for the past X number of years since Siri came out. And so these are little nuances and things that's happening to us while we're being trained by big, large, you know, disruptive companies like Apple's and Google. And it's happening in healthcare, it's happening in health systems. But the biggest disruption I see is in the health systems, the way it's being carried right now. And you saw what happened to it with COVID. And we can touch on that once it comes to my question. But it's already here. We're living it right now. And before you know it, you'll notice it when you look back and see that you're already living it.
I pick up on that point because it's very interesting. We developed a whole health system based on disease. Healthcare is not healthcare, it's actually disease care. So for the most part, we've been treating the exception. Our desired state is to be healthy and healthier. We have to modify the compensation system to motivate people to keep us healthy, not keep us sick. And that's a fundamental shift. What we're looking at is the outside coming in. It's fascinating that 12 years ago, Google, Microsoft were both involved and had very, very large initiatives in the health space, and they actually dropped them because the amount of resistance from the cultural. So a couple of things that have to be broken. First, we have to release the data. Every physician is holding on to their data way too tight. Consider that the data has all of the magic. That the moment we start doing integrated models of big data, we're going to find out really how the body works and what doesn't work. The second thing that we have to do is take a look at the body as a system. There is a relationship between the mind and the body. There's a relationship between the gut and the heart and the mind, and all of the above. We're not looking at it that way. So there are fundamental shifts that have to happen here. I completely agree with the panel. They're going to come from the outside. because most of us in any given industry, we're locked in within the rails and we cannot see the innovation coming from the outside to be forced.
Great points, all of you. And Yenvy, you actually brought up, made a comment about all the big dogs in the industry kind of being involved in this. And that actually was perfect because that leads me into my next question for Meggie. Meggie, just yesterday, we saw a big announcement made by Microsoft that they just purchased an AI speech technology firm, if I'm pronouncing it right, Nuance, for over $19 billion. What does this mean for us in healthcare and overall like patient care? Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe the technology?
Yeah, so people that are not familiar, I mean, Nuance is one of the big dogs, like Yenvy was talking about, in the field of dictation software, and they've actually evolved into ambient voice technologies. And so what Microsoft is doing is amazing if you actually look at what they're doing with their whole Microsoft Cloud for healthcare. And what they're trying to do is incorporate the technologies that are happening in the operations today in the healthcare networks. And they're taking these technologies and allowing, so with machine learning and AI, right, what's wonderful with this is that you get volumes and volumes of data that you can analyze. And so there's so much that happens in a patient-doctor conversation or any clinician really that's not captured, right? And that's captured after the fact. And so what a lot of EHRs are looking at, and Microsoft, I love that they're doing this, so that they can incorporate it in the healthcare systems, is that how can we incorporate this ambient voice technology so that we can focus on the patient and have this patient-centered care. Now, as Yenvy mentioned, this is not new, right? So you look at Siri, everyone's been doing this, right? We just haven't incorporated it within healthcare. So this is a big game changer. Because it allows healthcare networks to really focus on the patient and incorporate technologies that we are using every day. So this is going to be wonderful. I'm really excited to see how Microsoft, takes this in. I've already seen their healthcare cloud for healthcare, but I'm actually really excited to see how the healthcare networks incorporate this within their operations, because I believe this is a great advantage. Not just within their EHR, but really in their operations to capture all that data, because the more data you have, the more patient-centered care you can have.
And it's fascinating. A lot of the speech recognition work was originally done here in Boca Raton by IBM. So Nuance was one of the players back then. But if you look at the back end for most call centers for automation or automotive systems, and in the PCs themselves, that was IBM work. Actually, Brett Gavigny, who's on the call now with Modernizing Medicine, had a fundamental role on that. So kudos to Palm Beach County for a lot of the developmental work that originally kicked off this whole arena.
That's really cool to know that, Peter. I didn't know that myself. So that's really interesting because I think a lot of you guys that were here with IBM, we're really doing some important work that I think a lot of people didn't even realize was happening right here in our backyard. So yeah, and I did want to ask just a little follow-up question there, Meggie, to my question about Microsoft and AI, but you had said multiple times just about all the data being collected.
Yeah.
I know that that's often kind of a hot topic as well, there's a lot of companies that are collecting a lot of this data, but can you talk a little bit about, and I know in one of our last conversations, Pete, you had some comments on this as well, but what's currently happening with all the data right now? Like, what are companies doing? Because I feel like some of them are just collecting data and it's a valuable resource that maybe we're not utilizing the way we should be. So can you guys talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the disruptors, I could tell you, are using that data, right? So there's so much data that you can gather, and what it allows you to do is really learn trends that before we were doing disease-centered care, right? Now with AI and machine learning, you can look at the entire patient's record and do this type of analysis and learn trends and identify things early on. So now you're having more preventative care than reactive patient care. And so I have seen many healthcare IT organizations are using this data. And so it's just all happening on the back end. But there's this, like Oscar was mentioning, sensitivity around, with healthcare, what I have learned is you don't want to be the first incorporating a technology because of the security. And so what, as much as we want to go in and be disruptors, they are, slightly laggers in the sense that they, watch how it's being done in other industries. And once it's fine tuned and refined, those processes, then they start bringing them into the healthcare networks.
When we talk about data, we have to, going to the future of healthcare itself, we have to look at the data outside of a silo of quote unquote healthcare data, right? We as humans interact with the world, with cars, with mountains, with water. And so when you collaborate healthcare data, disease data, that type of thing, you correlate that with the world data, everything else that's part of daily living. And that's the power of data, that you're not observing it and measuring within a silo itself. And that allows us to build the correlations of where diseases are coming from, what areas, when the trend starts to happen. And so that's where the power of data actually starts becoming living data.
That's a fascinating point. We actually did some work for one of the major league sports leagues. And one of the things that we found that there was a correlation between sports injuries and the environment that the players were playing in, temperature and humidity, to the point that you can predict when players were going to get hurt. Not which player, but what player is going to get hurt. And what we did was actually take all of the injury data and overlapped environmental information that they weren't capturing themselves. We actually went to weather.com, overlaid the injury data on the weather information, and all of a sudden go, at this temperature and intersection of temperature and humidity, X number of people are going to get hurt. So the fascinating thing is we went back to the CEO of this organization and said, actually, this is a preventable injury. This is good news. First, if you can anticipate that this kind of condition is going to happen, take an extra time out, hydrate your players, bring their temperature down, sell a commercial, you just saved a ton of money and made money. The other thing that we found within the database, there was a relationship between concussion and ACL injuries. What? Well, you go to neurologist, you go to orthopedic, do these people ever talk? No, but all of the data was there when you created the big data model. Meggie was saying, now you're looking at full systems of the body and the relationships within.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting, Pete. I think that, when, one of the things I was always amazed at is when we did work with some data brokers to try to bring in data for some programs and initiatives we were working on, we were just amazed at how much data is collected on the consumer and the patient, really, that you don't even know, right? I think, Google has mastered it, Facebook, social platforms have mastered it. They give away these free applications and free services, and they're really not free. It's really about getting this information and targeting you from a marketing and consumer perspective. So, but there's all these data brokers that collect all this data and aggregate it together. And even though, there's privacy settings for applications and they de-identify information, there's still always ways to sort of track it back down to an individual. So when you are looking at a website or you are somewhere, the information that's being shown to you is targeted to you as that specific consumer. And so, so I was amazed by that there's so much information out there on the consumer that you can purchase to, again, not for nefarious purposes, but to be able to, better target them with maybe more specific healthcare campaigns or better target them, for a specific population of patients. And so it's pretty interesting. And in healthcare, we're in this dichotomy, right? Where Pete was mentioning earlier, we want to free the information, which we do, and we want to release it to the consumers and make it more sort of democratized. But then on the flip side of that, there's privacy laws and security, and you're getting dinged every time you're breached, right? And so it's this sort of polar opposites fighting against each other. I think the right thing, obviously, to do it is to release the information and sort of aggregate it together. But it's interesting how there's just so much information on individuals that As a healthcare provider, I could tell you we're not doing enough with that information. I think companies like marketing companies and external companies and vendors are I think working more with that information than we are as a healthcare provider. But I think that's we need to get there. And then the last thing I'll say about that as well is that I've seen this interesting graph where it talks about when you're taking care of a patient or a consumer, that the data that we have, and this goes to the social determinants of health, the data that we collect in the healthcare system for you is about 10% of the data that really is a determinant to your health, right? So I think Yenvy was talking about this a little earlier as well. It's like, there's all these social data elements. What do you do? Do you work out every day? Do you, what do you eat? All these sorts of different sort of social determinants of health that impact your health, not just, how many times did I go to a hospital and what did I do in that hospital or physician practice. And so information is the key, and it's very powerful. And I think the more we empower our providers with information and the more we sort of democratize that data, I think the better we're all going to be.
And to add to that, I think that's why remote patient monitoring has evolved tremendously, and actually during this pandemic has grown exponentially, because it allows us to analyze, do chronic disease management and analyze these chronic diseases while incorporating the lifestyle, right? And so it's not just analyzing it within the hospital setting, but within their daily life, and then getting all that data. And so now when you can analyze this data, among different patients with their lifestyle, your treatment is going to be very different than looking at it within just the healthcare network.
These are great points. Yeah, it's funny thinking about just kind of looking at healthcare, not from just like Pete was saying, the word patient, like the patient perspective, that actually looking at, like you were saying, the cognitive, the lifestyle, all of that. I mean, it's pretty interesting to be able to look at more of like preventative medicine and preventative measures instead of just when you're actually sick. Because I think that, just us as people in our community, we always think about healthcare as just that. We get sick, we go to the doctor, and that's it. But I think that, even, some of, again, our discussions that we've had in our peer group is just that, I think Florida is like the perfect place, especially with the pandemic, but really to start looking at our aging population, even the younger population that is starting to, get more into yoga and more lifestyle and nutrition. And so I think that we live in a place where we actually could collect a lot of data on that and probably be a very forward-thinking community that does look at those things. So it's really
mentioned a very important word, which is preventative medicine. That's playing defense. How about proactive health? This is pushing your body to be optimum performance of mind, body, and spirit, right? So far we say, okay, we're going to keep you from getting sick. I don't want to be sick. I want to be as, big time, proactive and as healthy as possible. So I want to achieve that. That's a very, very different paradigm from our traditional healthcare system. Okay, the healthcare system considers health as the absence of disease. No, it's the other way around. Disease is the absence of health. Okay, think of it. It's a shift in the thinking. Let's think of the positive. How do we take ourselves to the next level?
And cool. To that point, Pete.
Yeah, I feel like this needs to be a follow-up discussion for us. The whole panel on just that. What were you going to say, Yenvy?
I just wanted to point out, as it relates to the health systems and prevention, right now, what we call prevention is early detection. It's really early detection of disease. If you in stage 1, we're going to be able to help you, right? But there is how do we prevent you from getting cancer? And so that's the system that we're living in right now. And we're with the right data, collaboration of data and lifestyle data, that's how you're able to stop it before it does happen.
Perfect. Very good points. Thank you guys so much for such a great discussion. Like, I'm actually really enjoying this, and I always learn a lot listening to you guys too. So I do want to talk a little bit about how the pandemic has affected us. Yenvy, this question is for you, is, when the COVID vaccines first started coming out, many elderly people could not get registered for the vaccine due to complicated online registration processes. What does the future of healthcare look like for populations that are not so tech savvy?
Depends on how far we go ahead into the future of what tech savvy is. The biggest transformation into just technology-wise itself is what we call spatial reality. Right now, we've heard of virtual reality, augmented reality, and there's tons of IoTs and sensors being built. Spatial reality it's just part of your world, right? Meaning you're just living daily, it's a daily life. You're part of the system. There isn't a phone of, for example, early on when we had rotary phones and you flip phone, you had to know how to dial the, right? Or you had a flip phone, you had to know how to open up the phone and make a phone call through those type of things. And so if you go far enough into the future, it's just part of your daily living. There isn't a hey, how do I log on? The cell phone itself might become obsolete. Your laptop will be obsolete at some point as well in the next 10, 15 years, 20 years. And so it depends on how far we want to go into the future, because this transformation is actually happening right now. We're really in phase 2, 3 of spatial reality, right? Where things are just part of your AirPods, taking temperatures of your health, alerts happening. If you're catching a cold or a fever or flu, you'll be alerted that it's starting to happen. So it's happening to you. It's your of technology that's happening all around you. Shirts will have sensors in them, clothing, your daily, you're talking to Alexa and robots in your home. So it's not something where you have to be aware that you need to make an action in order to have a with technology, because you're already living as one with technology. And that's just how I view the future of healthcare is that that's where prevention starts to happen, is the early detections of the early onset of whether it be high temperature, a sneeze, you're in an area that's highly populated with disease, of some type of disease or fever or flu, or a contagion that's starting to spread. Those things will start becoming more proactive for just a normal person that's just living day to day. And so it's not so much more of a force to be part of technology.
It's really interesting. So you're basically saying that, it's not going to be something, if I'm understanding this right, it's not going to be something where an action that somebody has to necessarily go and take every time, that it's more happening to them and they may not even be aware of it.
That's exactly right. You look at our bodies are actually dynamic. They're not statics. Our traditional health system has been measuring us in static form. Only when you show up at a physician do we get measured. That's not what happened in the 60 days in between, in the year in between. So one of the wonderful things that is happening now, as mentioned, was now we got automated sensors feeding information on a continuous basis. That's how our body works. So the ability to continuously monitor and put it into intelligent systems that is not obstructed by an individual, a human being having to enter the information manually and be prone to error, is going to be a very significant step forward. So sensors, the information, the Internet of Things, pulling a lot of data into automated fashion and creating very significant databases is going to be very, very worthwhile development.
Yeah, it's really leveraging passive technology, right? So when you think of the smart homes that are being built, right? Just think about the smart homes when they know you're home and you don't do anything, you just are there, and you're not home, and they readjust the climate and all that. So that's all called passive technology. And so it allows us, like Yenvy was saying, to capture data and interact without actually, grabbing a, piece of hardware, for example, to enter that data. And so and just talking about the aging community, aging tech is a huge movement that's occurring today, because by 2030, the majority of our population is going to be 65 and older. And so this is something, and we're in the Palm Beach, the heart of that. So this is something that's going to be just growing. It's happening today, but it's going to continue to grow because the majority of the patients will be, the elderly. And so we need to be thinking about that, the way to incorporate passive technology and the tools that we're providing, moving forward in the future.
Yeah, it's a good point, Meggie. And just to kind of bring it back to an earlier question, right? Why did Microsoft buy Nuance? Microsoft bought Nuance because Nuance has, natural language processing technology, speech translation technology. So you talk about these passive technologies, right? Voice is going to be the new user interface of the future. It already is, right? In our consumer lives, you're talking to Alexa or Siri and telling them to turn off the lights and do certain things. In our healthcare organization, we're piloting some Alexa type devices in the patient's rooms to control the temperature and control the lights, because again, as a consumer, you want to have the same experience when you're at home or anywhere else. So, and the same thing, when you're at home as a consumer, talking to your Alexa to remind you to take medications or when is my next appointment. And the voice is obviously not, it's sort of the next user interface, but even after that, sort of what Meggie was talking about, then becoming even just more presence aware and not even having to speak, because the patterns of what you do and the things that you're doing and where you are in your house are going to dictate certain things. So I think that'll make it less friction or more frictionless for the senior population. I can tell you when we were doing the COVID vaccine registration process for the folks in South Broward, a lot of talk went into how do we make it a lot easier for consumers, how we make it easier for people to register, and at the same time balancing that with making sure you say who you are, and right. So it's this sort of balance of ease of use and trying to capture all the information you need to get folks vaccinated properly. And so I think absolutely the future is exciting, and I think that I think there is a misnomer in that question too, Nikki, that seniors are not as tech savvy. We run a lot of numbers on our seniors, whether it's through the patient portal access, and they're probably the most active on our patient portals because they want to see their lab results, they want to see certain things. So it's an interesting. There's definitely a part of it that's are not tech savvy and are getting their nieces and nephews to access their iPhone or Android device, but definitely there's a lot of seniors and elderly that are already using some of this technology pervasively.
Oscar, one of the examples back from 2003, Dr. Redmond Burke at Miami Children's Hospital. He's a cardiologist or a cardiovascular surgeon on little kids. So he physically had to be holding a little heart where he completely dismembered it and then pull it back together. He could not let go of this heart for 8 to 10 hours at a time. So he actually started using back then the IBM Via Voice system, where he would communicate with a computer, because he said, I can't turn around and type. I don't have the time to talk to a nurse or an assistant and give me the information. So instead of saying Alexa, he would say, computer, give me the information, give me the vitals, give me the size, give me the background on this thing. And he was communicating. This was in 2003. That was 20 years ago. And it was fascinating how this whole thing has evolved. It's wonderful.
It's pretty awesome.
I see on the Zoom on the bottom, it's being our voice is being naturally translated as well, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Go into our patient record, Oscar.
So we've got, let me see, we've got about 10 minutes left. So I've got a few questions left here. Hopefully we'll get through them all. But again, thank you guys for such a great discussion today. And for anybody, again, that's listening, this is going to be the first of a few. It's going to be a series. So if you're enjoying this, there will be more. Oscar, so I did want to ask you this next question here. As we continue to immerse ourselves in a more tech savvy world, do you believe that doctors and other healthcare professionals are at risk of losing their jobs to AI? I know that this is just a common question overall in tech, but actually we had an example here was that maybe there's an AI that can detect like tumors in an MRI and eventually just replace radiologists? Like, how do you think that that's going to change, you know, healthcare professionals and their job opportunities?
I think we're honestly all going to be replaced by robots probably in the next few years. So, but in all seriousness, I think that Pete is better at answering the AI questions, but I don't think I don't think physicians or healthcare professionals are at risk of losing their jobs because of AI. I think AI is a complementary technology. I know there's a lot of, you know, sci-fi and a lot of discussions about whether Skynet's going to take over and the Terminator is going to come for us all at some point. But I do think that at this point where the technology is at, it's really more about, you know, again, enhancing our diagnosis, enhancing the providers, providing the right decision, the right information so that our providers can make the right decisions. You know, AI can comb through hundreds of millions of data records and history on a particular diagnosis and provide that to a provider in a matter of seconds, right? Versus a provider being, you know, having to, go through hundreds of journals, and it's just impossible. So I think that, and we're already seeing it in parts of the country, in many parts of the country that, you know, in Johns Hopkins and other places where they're already using it for, from an imaging perspective, right? They've had, certain imaging vendors go through hundreds of thousands of images and say what a tumor looks like, and being able to present that to the providers and be able to diagnose or help diagnose a provider that's going through that. So I don't think we're at risk of it. I think, you know, our industry, healthcare and healthcare technology in particular, is in constant change, right? Healthcare is also in constant change because, you know, there's new treatments, there's new diagnoses, there's new diseases that are found all the time. And technology is the same way. Technology is always changing. There's always what's today trending, the next day is already outdated and you're already on to the next thing. And so I think as healthcare professionals, we have to embrace change and not be afraid of it, and be able to just, you know, again, embrace it and use it for the good. May some roles change in the future. You know, I know we use like robotic process automation on some back-end processes. So there's monotonous tasks that can be taken on by some sort of AI algorithm and you know, make somebody's job easier or free them up to do, you know, more important things. I think that's always going to be there, but I don't think people are at risk of losing their jobs or anything like that.
Yeah, the AI becomes what's called clinical decision support. So it is a tool available to the physician to make better decisions. So the physician has to evolve up with the technology. The ones that are very, very much at risk are the ones that do not master that technology and then become relegated very, very down on the food chain and disappear, because they will not be as competent as somebody that is fully skilled and has all the information available to them.
Yeah, I think what they're trying to incorporate, I have my education in biomedical informatics, and what they're trying to incorporate is technology into healthcare so that they can educate these clinicians on the technology so that it can be, as Oscar's saying, complementary, right? Because it allows them now to analyze data and provide a diagnosis with a different lens, because now they have more information at their fingertips, where previously, you know, it would be sifting and looking through records and records of data.
I would say where the disruption happens, just like in any job or position, is that the scope of the job and the skill set becomes very narrow because of technology and AI and machine learning. So, for example, 30% of the first visit to a doctor's office, the patient is misdiagnosed. And the second visit is when they're much closer to a stronger diagnosis. And that first misdiagnosis with the complementary to AI technology, machine learning technology, that will alleviate the first time misdiagnosis visits, right? That's one example. Just like in any skill set or job, there's this aspect where AI technology, machine learning, whatever we want to put in front of the doctors, it has to be, there's bedside manner. There is a creativity aspect to it of being human that the doctors and the healthcare providers have to contribute alongside AI technology. It's so when we look at jobs that can be replaced, it's the monotonous jobs, the jobs that there are that you can scale with technology, but the human side of it, where the patient's interaction needs to happen with the doctor, that is where the physicians have to scale up themselves, because that's what we as humans will crave for as we start to interact with technology later on. And the physicians who can't relate in that manner, that's where they become disrupted, because then the technology will do the job better than the physician by diagnosing the patients, early diagnose the patients, and even prevent the patients from having certain diseases. And so from there, it becomes a physician has to be some type of partner with the patient later on, with the accompany of technology itself.
Yenvy, on our list of questions here, I kind of wanted to skip and ask you a question here, because I think this kind of goes perfectly with this part of the discussion. But I wanted to see if you can talk a little bit about HealthSnap, because I know, basically allowing physicians to monitor patient vitals and live healthy and have this data remotely. Do you think that technology, as it advances, do you think that we're going to get rid of like physical patient or physical doctor visits? Do you think they're going to become obsolete?
Yeah, it's already happening. If you look at just virtual medicine itself, virtual, with everything that's happened in COVID, the need to actually visit physicians get a script, the need to visit a physician because you have high temperature, especially in pediatrics. There's no reason to bring a child in when she has a fever or a cold, especially if you can gauge her vitals and her metrics just with the technology that's already available to us. And so there's tons of technology being built where it attaches to your cell phone, your mobile devices that can give you those type of numbers. And so it's already happening. The doctor's visits will become obsolete unless it's some type of emergency, for example. And we're starting to see even in emergency cases where the physicians can guide the patients as well. And so the brick and mortar setups will be obsolete. We're seeing that corporations like Apple's are taking over doctors' offices and keeping them for themselves. Look at Forward Health, look at One Medical. These are all health systems, they're more corporate medical setups that's partnering with like corporations like Apple's and Microsoft's and Intel and whatnot. And so the way we see healthcare today will be completely different in 5 years, and it's already making those shifts. You see people like Glenn Tolman, who started in EMR, and he went into corporate wellness, corporate health, and then now he started his new company where it just hires physicians and everything's virtual, right? And so there we are. It's the guys who have went into health systems in the first place are shifting away from health system, putting tons of money in Silicon Valley into corporate owned healthcare now. And it's all driven by tech.
Amazing. Yeah. And I'm looking at the time here. I know I've got a couple questions left, and I'm like, I know one of these questions was evolved around security, and I feel like this is going to be a whole nother long discussion. So I think I'm going to cut it off here, since I know we've got only about 60 seconds left here. And maybe we'll leave that for the next, session in our series. But again, I just want to thank all of you, because I think this was such a perfect discussion to get, the series going. And I'm taking notes as you guys were talking, so I kind of have some things that we can open up for the next couple sessions in our series. So thank you again to all the panelists. Thank you again to everybody that woke up early, 8 a.m. here on a Tuesday to listen in. And thank you again for all the comments there in the chat. It seems like everybody's agreeing that this was a great discussion. So thank you again, and hopefully all of you have a wonderful day today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank